Hey there. It's time for another Dirt Daily. And today I am working on the FJ80. It's actually a FZJ80, but I'm just going to call it the FJ80 because that's easier. This is an 80 series Land Cruiser that I bought. It's been sitting for 7 years. And so I want to figure out why it doesn't run. So let's go through the steps. Number one, first thing it needs is a new battery. I put in an Optima battery. I really like Optimas and Odyssey. Those are kind of the two brands that I've been using a lot on my different project trucks. But also just basic parts store batteries seem to last pretty well. I put the battery in. I was able to put the biggest one I could fit in here, and then also I put a battery charger on it to make sure that it was in good shape and had a good charge. This battery has been sitting a while, and you can see it's way down at hardly any volts, like 6.5. So we're gonna let this thing sit and cook and come back later and keep checking on other things. The next thing that I did was check the oil. You should always make sure there's oil in the engine if you are about to try and start it. This has plenty of oil. If anything, the oil level is too high, which isn't really a concern, except that the coolant level is really low. In fact, I don't see any coolant in there at all. So hopefully we can just top off the coolant, and hopefully there isn't a head gasket issue which is causing the oil level to run high. So let's get some extra coolant. All right, I got coolant. I looked in the overflow tank and it had red coolant. So I grabbed red coolant, Asian vehicle coolant. I don't know that it really makes a difference, especially on a truck that's this old, but I'm sure if you're a purist, you think that you should have only the approved coolant in here. There we go. I think we're filling it up. Okay. Probably 3/4 of a gallon. So about 3 quarts. Oh, it's still going down. We'll probably have to top that off again. Also, it's good to check the coolant level on the overflow bottle, and that is actually reading full. So next step, go inside the truck and see if we can make it run. Let's see if this will run. Actually, the first thing we're going to see is, that's a good sign. So I talked to the guys at Slee Off-Road. They're an off-road shop near Denver. They work on Land Cruisers. And when I told them I bought an 80 series, they were like, why didn't you buy a 200 series, like the current version? And I was like, well, because even though that's 120 times better than an 80 series, it's also 120 times more expensive. So they did give me some pointers on my 80 series. They said if you turn the key and the check engine light comes on, that's a good sign, because that means you're getting power to the ECU for the fuel injection. Now the next step is turn the key and see if the fuel gauge moves. And the fuel gauge is very, very low. So we're gonna dump some fuel in this thing. And then, well, the other thing that we should be hearing at this point is a fuel pump. And I don't hear a fuel pump. I hear what sounds like an electric fan running, which may be like something in the HVAC. Usually when you have a fuel injected vehicle and you turn the key on, the fuel pump runs for a little bit and builds up pressure in the fuel system. And I'm not hearing that. So let's dump some fuel in this thing and we'll just crank it over and see if it does anything. put a couple gallons of fuel in the Land Cruiser. It's kind of hard because the price of fuel is really expensive right now. And if this thing has fuel in it, it's probably old and garbage, shellac, really gross. However, there's the possibility it's completely dry, and that's why the previous owner said it wouldn't run. There's also the possibility that by putting fresh gas in it, I'm just mixing it with the old gas, I'm eventually going to have to drain all of that fuel out of the fuel tank and throw it all away and start fresh again. But that's kind of the gamble I'm taking right now. A few gallons of gas, I think, is a cheap way to find out if A, the fuel pump's running, and B, if the thing will start. So put some gas in it and hop back in and see if we can get it to crank up. Here we go. Well, it tries to start. Let's test the fuel pump. Here's an example of how Toyota is just smart. It's just simple and smart. This right here in the front corner is a diagnostic plug. And inside that plug, there is a terminal. In fact, if you look really close inside this cap, you can see markings. There's one of these terminals, fuel FP plus, and that's fuel pump positive. So if you send 12 volts to that, and your fuel pump is good, it'll turn on the fuel pump and start pumping fuel. There's actually a battery positive terminal in here too. So when the key is turned on, you can get 12 volts right from this terminal, jump it over to this terminal, and that should run your fuel pump. I'm gonna use a power probe because then I don't have to have the key turned on. Now, what do you do? How do you tell if the fuel pump is running? Well, you come over here to this fuel regulator. You remove the return line, which goes back to the tank, and when the fuel pump runs, it should pump fuel up into the fuel rail and squirt it out here, and that'll tell you if the fuel pump is working. So, pretty simple. Grab your power probe. Oh, by the way, I learned all this stuff by calling the guys at SLE. So if you're a Land Cruiser nut and you want to learn more, talk to those guys. All right, so we're going to send some power here, 12 volts. Here's my diagnosis. Fuel pump not pumping fuel. I'm not getting fuel to the engine. Engine's not going to run. Fuel pump on Toyotas is in the fuel tank. But luckily for us, the Toyota guys built an access hatch underneath the back seats. So I need to pull the back seats out, pull the carpet up, open the access panel, and get to the fuel pump. And I also need to get a fuel pump coming. So I'm going to order a fuel pump and start tearing into the interior. And that's it for this Dirt Daily. Next time we'll be swapping a fuel pump. Here's the really ironic thing. This is a 1994 Toyota Land Cruiser, 300,000 miles. I just sold a 1993 Ford F-350 with, I don't think it had that many miles, probably 100 and something. It also needed a fuel pump. Basically, I'm finding that gas is really expensive and it's really bad for fuel pumps, especially if the trucks sit for a long time. So keep them driving. That's it for this Dirt Daily. We'll see you next time.